What's up, everybody? Mark with Cardivox Academy here, and we're getting back into some extreme metal vocal analysis. My band Kardashev, we're back from Germany. We played Euroblast Festival. That was a ton of fun. Had a great set. Really cool meeting everybody. And I'm back to doing videos and giving vocal lessons full time. I'm a harsh vocal coach. That's my full-time job. I teach people how to do stuff like safely and efficiently, or so they don't hurt themselves. And I analyze vocals. So let's talk about how Dave Simonich does it. In Signs of the Swarm, I Won't Let You Die, one take. Here we go.
This is how blessings work.
Let's pause it there. So first things first, I heard the, because I know they released a music video for this recently. I heard that kind of in passing. I haven't listened to the full track. So this is really my first real interaction with this song. A couple things first and foremost that we're going to talk about. Well, actually, let me check real quick. This was mixed and mastered, I'm assuming. Yeah, it says mixed and mastered by Matt Thomas of Ashtone Audio. Okay, cool. I thought so. That's not a bad thing, by the way. It just, everything sounded so nice and crisp and even. I was like, dang, that's like really high quality. So first things first, Dave's is one of my favorite voices to listen to a lot of the time, even though people who are not new to the channel know that while I do really like deathcore, it's not my top tier favorite genre of metal. It generally goes to black metal. But when it comes to vocals, like deathcore, love it or hate it, you hear some of the most acrobatic, some of the most, I would say, technique intensive styles. And so it's one of my, even though it's maybe not my favorite metal genre, it is my favorite to analyze because there's always something to talk about. A couple things I really like about Dave's vocals that I want to point out. I'm going to leave maybe some of the longer in-depth stuff for a little bit later. But there are a couple of things I want you to point out, focus on. Number one, Dave's scream here. It's a very tight sounding scream. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying he's overly tight in the space around his vocal folds, called the glottis, right? A lot of screams that we do are intentionally constricted, right? Like if I do something like, it would be very dishonest of me to tell you that there's no tension, there's no squeeze, but it's happening in a very strategic place. From the sound of this, and from what I've talked with Dave about in the past, we were lucky enough to have him on the channel recently. We did a very long discussion about his voice. You should really go check that out. But from what I've talked about, talked with him about, a lot of the screams that we're hearing are coming from a large amount of closure sort of happening at the top of the throat, back of the mouth, right? And that's what's giving us these really sort of TV staticky types of sounds, right? Now, he tends to really shift and modulate those sounds. He does a lot with them in his oral space in the mouth. And we're going to focus on that. But one thing I want to point out to you is there are a couple ways we can tell if a scream is more on the compressed side or more on the loose and open side, right? One of which is how long the scream can be held. If he was doing like an old school, I say old school, but it's still around. It's actually one of my favorite vocals. But if he was doing the more open, traditional, maybe we'll call it breath distortion false chord. I don't know why I did breath distortion, like being smug about it. I think that's a great word to describe it. So I don't know. Don't pay attention to that. Breath distortion is a great word. This sort of sound, this like, A-E-I-O-U. Unless you're adding closure to that, you really can't hold it very long. And that's not really a problem if you know how to strategically breathe and you're wanting that floppy, loosey-goosey sound. If somebody's able to hold these things for longer, it means that essentially they're creating a smaller opening for that air to come through, right? Now, how we do that, that's the trick. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit more in the video once you've had the time to think about these things. Another thing I want to stress is that one is not better than the other. A lot of people get caught up on how long you can hold screams. It's one of the things as a vocal coach I really don't care a whole lot about. How long should you hold a scream? Well, what is the song demanding? And then do that. Do you have to hold a scream for 15 seconds, or can you just be a better strategic breather? I don't know. Maybe I'll make a video on that. But I'm really liking this sound that we're getting from Dave. Let's keep going though. Yeah. Nice. So I know I'm pausing it again very, very soon, but he's doing something really, really cool that I want to talk to you about. So a lot of times, especially with new vocalists, what they'll run into is they hear a vocalist like this, who's incredibly talented, very, very seasoned, lots of experience. And they will hear all of these, like, you know, like these things that are being done with the tongue, the lips, the jaw. And they'll think those things are happening internally, right? What we want to think about when we're doing vocals, and what he's really, really good at, is creating a steady tone for us to then shape with our mouths, right? A good example of this is, you know what? I'll go back to that old like false chorus sound that I mentioned earlier in the video, right? Pardon me. If I take that sound and I do it on its own with no bells or whistles, it sounds fine, but it's not that impressive, right? If I just go, you know, A-E-I-O, yo, that's just the sound source, the distortion mechanism doing its thing, and my mouth being neutral. Now, what if I do the same thing, but what I'm going to do is a very common technique. I'm going to put my tongue forward, create a little bit of a tunnel. You know, I'm going to pucker my lips to give it a sort of KV sound. A-E-I-O. That sounds a lot better, right? And so I actually want to go back and hear that like, wow, he did, because that was really neat. Oh, his thumb's in the way of his mouth. Dang it. That's irritating. I mean, we can tell what's going on, but it's always nice. I love these vocal one takes because we can see exactly what's doing. But one thing I do that is worth actually pointing out is notice how open his mouth is in these spaces, right? That has a lot of impact on whether our vocal sounds like a low or sounds like a high, right? If I take something more compressed, like a, right, that, and I open my mouth, you're going to hear it change from a low to a mid. I'm not doing that here. I'm doing that here. Listen. Right? So this opening of the mouth, the jaw looking down and back, often we do, okay, anyways, I was about to go off on an unnecessary tangent. But this is a really, like, if you want to know, like, what should your mouth and jaw position look like for a good mid scream, this screenshot is a very good example. Let's keep going. You actually can see his tongue a little bit there, which is interesting. My initial thought was he was controlling that mostly with the opening of the lips. But it looks like he might be doing that tongue moving back and forth. That would be really interesting. Let me watch that again. That's fascinating, actually. That's really cool if that's what he's doing. Maybe a little bit of both. Maybe a little bit of both. It's interesting. Let's talk about that more in a second, but that's fascinating. All right. Okay. Like, how much do I, let's, oh, it's not showing me. Usually when you hover over the little timeline thing. It shows you where people are watching the most. I'm willing to bet that's one of them, right? So Dave's doing a bunch of really cool stuff. And it's actually one of my favorite things about metal vocals kind of as a concept, right? I'll talk about what he's doing and then I'll talk about why I love it so much. So one thing that he's doing, this is something that was really, really popular. I don't know exactly where it started, but it got really popular. The first time, at least I was aware of it, was early Signs of the Swarm, when CJ was the vocalist, right? And it was this sort of like airy modulation of tone, for lack of a better way to describe it, that involved literally like sort of sometimes breathing through or pushing air through a smaller space. Like one thing you don't really hear a lot in clean singing is somebody going like, you know, I don't know, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. You don't really hear that because it sounds goofy, right? But in metal vocals, it can be a way to make screams sound really, really cool. And he's doing that exceptionally well. One thing that makes it impressive is he's doing that at the end of very, very held out screams. Now, again, like I said earlier, I don't think how long you can hold a scream is what defines it as good or bad, unless you're like gassing out in like half a second or 1 second. That's just a matter of function, right? But what I will say is it is impressive when you can hold it out for a really long time. And so the fact that we are holding an even compressed airflow, right? We've got like this. Well, that's the way I do it anyway. And moving back and forth between the amount of air released. That's very, very cool. I think that's really neat. I'm very impressed by that. And that's leading into one of the things I really like about metal vocals is there are a lot less rules. Does it sound cool? Is it harming you? No. Well, then you're doing it right. A lot of times people ask me, hey, Mark, am I doing it right? And I say, well, does it sound cool to you and the people whose opinions you care about? Yes. Does it hurt you? Does it damage your voice over time? Do you notice any difference in your voice the day of or in the days following? No. Then you're doing it right, as far as I'm concerned. That's sick. I want to see if he does a lot more. One thing you can do, by the way, I know I'm talking a lot, but that's what I do. One thing you can do, by the way, to really sort of get into learning how these different vowel shapes work is to get outside your native language, right? Especially, you know, I only speak English. I can read French decently well, but Verona, the other coach here at Cardivox Academy, will tell you I can't speak it for shit. You know. But one thing that you can do is you can get interested in languages that have a lot of very forward vowels. French does this. German does this. Anything with sort of like an sound, like I think the Swedish word for beer is öl. Turns out that's a great position for certain lows, right? You don't have to learn to speak the language, but a lot of times what you can do, and I sometimes will do this with students, right, is you can like look up like, you know, Swedish phonology or German phonemes, German vowel sounds. And oftentimes you'll find websites with little clickable sounds and you might hear like an U, right? U. One rule of thumb is that for mids and lows, especially lows, if it feels really rumbly in the front of your face and it sounds echoey, it's probably going to sound cool, right? Like, I don't know, I'm just going to turn my tongue sideways like this. Okay. I'm not the first person to do it. Plenty of people do it. Like that. And I'll go, I don't know. I'm just pulling stuff out of the air. Yeah, it sounds neat, right? So finding frontal buzzy vowels and playing around with other language vowels just for fun is a great way to find these things. And then you can slur them around, you know, do legitimately. Do that while you do vocals. It's only going to work on very compressed vocals. Great for fry screams, by the way. But you have like this, you know. We don't do that stuff in Kardashev, so Dave puts me to shame as far as the coolness factor, but that's essentially what I'm talking about. Let's keep going. Was that a rolled tongue or was that a floppy soft palate? Am I overthinking this? Am I overthinking this? So I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to be transparent with you. I'm going to be transparent with you. It sounds kind of like he could be rolling his tongue really like messily. Or it sounds like he could be expulsing extra air and loosening up the opening and getting like a like into the sound. Like if I do like a no, maybe that's not it. Maybe it is the tongue roll. I don't know. I just have to ask him. But let's go ahead and let's talk looseness and wetness in vocals, because we're hearing a lot of that here. Also, exceptionally cool writing. So at the beginning we have the sound clip, this is how blessings work, and then I think he said this is my curse, this is how in metal vocals, and then the voice sample came in again, blessings work. That was a classy touch. That was very cool. That passive fourth, like the back and like that track at the beginning was separate from his voice, and now they're interplaying. That's sick. That's sick. That's really cool. But let's talk wet and floppy tones. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because I want to mostly focus on his voice, but this is ways that we can do it, right? So essentially when we have, if you hear a wet sound, okay. If you hear a wet floppy sound, right? Chances are what you're hearing is looser tissue. Right. And a good example of this is what we can do with our lips. Right. So if I go here, if I make the lips really, really tight and I push air through them, I get a TV static sound. If I then loosen them, I get a floppier sound. So if we're to take, again, focusing on highly compressed vocals today, like a higher, like, I don't know, like that type of vocal, right? If I loosen those tissues or maybe even let some of the loose tissues touch, right? Weird. We get a wetter sound, right? And that can sound really, really cool. It does sound like he's got some of that going on there, although I think he's got a little bit more top of the throat activation in that the supraglottal space than I did in that example. But he's doing that really well. This is kind of crazy, and this is one of the things that I find very impressive. Again, love it or hate it about deathcore vocals, is that this requires muscles that people don't generally intentionally use to be used intentionally, right? Like imagine, actually I've seen people do this. Like we have muscles around our eyes, the orbicularis oris, a ring muscle that we could, rather than just closing our eyes, squeeze them narrowly. And I can't do it. Technically I could, but if you look it up online, it looks wild because somebody's taking the time to learn how to do that, or maybe they had a genetic predisposition. In the back of our throat, we have muscles that that constrict as part of the process of swallowing, right? You could call it deglutition if you want to sound really fancy for whatever reason. When we are doing these more compressed vocals, like if I take that same sound I did before, right, and I open it up, right, it takes a lot of concentration, and like I can do it, but I don't know if I could do it as on command as this, because this is like his specialty, right? But the fact that he can go compressed, 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 open, 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 compressed, compressed, now a little bit more open, but not quite as far open. His closure is on like a gradient. That's one of the things that's making his voice unique right now, if you're kind of curious about that. That, and also like, I haven't really heard any like super loose, like breath distorted sounds, which is fascinating. I could talk about that for a long time, but how long is this video? Where are we coming up on? We're at 22 minutes. Jesus Christ. Let's keep going.
God to hear you cry. You are dead in my fucking eyes. You had both lies as much tonight. You are stuff. I give you life. I will let you die. I will let you die. I let you die.
This is going to be cool. This is going to be good. As is customary, my favorite part is the outro. That's generally my favorite part of any song. I love a mean outro. An outro that really like engages you is my favorite part of any song. Most of the time, songs I like are songs that are just building up to the end. I love that. God, I know I'm gonna be putting my foot in my mouth here. Because this guy looks incredibly familiar. Who is that? Does it say it does it say it down here? Mixing Matt Thomas. No, no, this is just who they're touring with. I don't know. I feel like I know who that is, and I just don't recognize his face, and I'm an idiot. You know, but that's what it is. Well, anyway, let's talk about that scream because it's here and it's really cool. Oh God, I don't even want to publish this because I feel like I know that person's face and they're gonna be like, dude, I've talked to you before, and I'll be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know if anybody needs to know this, but outside of metal vocals, I'm kind of stupid. So, like, don't hate me. But hey, great scream. It's not Matt Honeycutt. Kind of looks like him with the mustache, but that's definitely not him. No chance. Anyway, just watch it is, and I'm that stupid. Here we go. Let's talk about this scream. Good God.
There is no God to hear you cry.
So that is really cool, although from the shaking in his face and the color in his face, looking a little over projected scream. So what we have there is a much more loose, comparatively loose vocal that's based on a false chord technique. Now, the way that I like to get there are multiple ways to get there. The way that I like to get there is really anything false chord. I'm a big Kargria guy. Many of us are. It's a very common thing. It's not my thing. I didn't make that up, right? But I like to take Kargria and I like to talk into it, right? And then I like to project it, right? So if I'm here and I say, you know, like, you know, and I'm gonna do like yeah, 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 you know. Like somebody says, hey, I'm walking in, you go, yeah, 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 right? I'm gonna do that, but instead of decaying, yeah, 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 I'm gonna increase, yeah, 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 right? Yeah, 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 yeah. Now you're gonna get to a point where it sounds very like Metallica. I like Metallica, but if you don't, you might be like, oh, I don't want to sound like that. We're moving through it. Don't worry. We have to make weird sounds to get to the sounds that we want, right? So, you know, I'm here. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ah! Oh, now we have something. Ah! Now it's important to note while I'm doing this, because this is a vocal, this type of scream is one I do all the time. Although I deliver it like a sad boy versus an angry boy, right? Because I only know how to write sad songs. I don't know how to write anything else. But now what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to get kind of punchy with it, right? And that punchiness is going to happen with our articulation. When it comes to any sort of pitched scream, I'm a very big fan of talking about them and teaching them based on real world sounds done intentionally. Because what this is this scream, there is no God to hear you cry, I think is what the lyrics are. It's just I don't want to say just because that's reductive, but it's a strategic yell. That's what it is, right? If somebody was like, that's just shouting, I'd be like, that's shouting with style. Toy Story fans know. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that and I'm going to take that and I'm going to put the distortion over here. I'm going to hold that on the back burner. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to summon my inner like Zach De La Rocha, my inner Fred Durst. I know what you're thinking. Those are totally different bands. To you, I say, shh, be patient. So if you think about them, say I don't got no family, but a pocket full of shells. It's all about the he said, she said bullshit, right? That's not what I want to sound like in the end, but the delivery is very interesting, right? Yeah, there is no God to hear me cry, or to hear you cry. I don't know the lyrics. What if I take that? Notice the way I'm articulating that. A really good example of this is Zelly from Paleface, right? Blah, 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 blah. Punch, duh, duh, duh. But that punch is happening with the articulation, the abdominal muscles, the diaphragm. It's not being punched out with the throat. That's the clarifying factor. That's what takes this from just yelling to yelling with style, right? So if I take this now, yeah, there is no God to hear you cry. And after that, your voice will be fine if done properly. I will say about this vocal, it's one that I find you have to work into, right? this vocal can be very, very taxing. And if it's going to be like your main vocal, you should have a lot of good vocal health practices and maybe write with some spaces in your songs, right? But it's an amazing sounding vocal. I absolutely love it. You know what? I don't care. I was going to say this video is already 30 minutes. Let's go ahead and stop it. But this is my channel and I do what I want. And I want to hear Dave's outro again because it was sick. I'm a little bit. I'm wagging my finger at you, Dave. I'm wagging my finger at you. Not really. From an education perspective, that thumb is killing me, bro. It's killing me. Not because it's wrong. It's not wrong. It's just getting in the way of me seeing the things I want to talk about and other people seeing the things that we want to talk about. So mild irritation there. But who cares, really? What I'm hearing is a lot of pulled back tongue, this sort of retroflex activation. And when we do that, you know, we can get some really cool tones. That's another thing. And that's a way. And that's something we have to think about when we're talking about our distortion mechanism, right? And I do a lot of very similar, not exactly the same, but similar compressed vocals for my lows and highs. One of the things that I have to compensate for is that without any modulation, without any compensation, it sounds very thin, right? This is what my low sounds like when I do it properly. That sounds pretty cool. Well, I think it sounds pretty cool. You may not, but I do. What if I do that, but I don't curl my tongue back, I don't pucker my lips, I don't drop my jaw? It's like, it's making me laugh because it's not that impressive, right? So if I take that and all I'm going to do, I'm gonna curl my tongue back, right? Because what I want to happen is I want some of those sound waves to bounce off the back of my tongue and stay in my mouth a little longer. That's what I'm. I know someone's gonna write something dirty in the comments. Stop it, or write it. Actually, I don't care. I'm gonna curl my tongue back. Listen what happens. Listen what happens, right? This is common knowledge, but it's still cool to see, right? So, that was shit. There we go. I'll give you life. Now it sounds pretty cool. Let's keep going. Yeah, that song is sick. That song's pretty cool. Last couple things I want to talk about. It's always fun to see what's on the suggested. Let's see. New Cradle of Filth. No way. That's awesome. More Signs of the Swarm, of course. Ooh, new Ingested. Spirit Box, Circle with Me featuring Tatiana. Keep your eye out for that. And then the vocal one take. I almost did that, but we just talked about the Visceral Rush on the channel. So if you want me to do that one too, let me know in the comments below. But essentially, one thing that I want to talk about is the closed and open mouth shapes. That's really, really important. A lot of times, vocalists will come to me and they'll say, "Mark, I feel like my vocals are boring." And then I'm like, "Oh, I doubt it." And then they show me, and then sometimes like, "Yeah, they're a little boring." Nobody's paying me to lie to them. They want me to be honest, right? One of the best ways you can start to solve that is just open your mouth, move your mouth more. This is metal. These are deathcore, death metal, black metal vocals. We can mess around. We're allowed to do that. You know, we don't have to be tied to convention. I don't give a shit about that stuff anyway. When people are like talking, anyway, I was about to get on a high horse. Maybe I'll make a video about it. But as someone who's given almost 5,000 vocal lessons and been at this for 15 years, most of the stuff I hear people talk about with metal vocals as things you should do, I'm just like, oh God, ugh, gross. Don't care. Do whatever you want. We're on a spinning rock through space and we're all gonna die and no one's gonna remember us. Just scream however the hell you want. So anyways, one thing you can do, rant over. I had to cut it short. If you want Cardivox rants, let me know. One thing you can do is just focus on opening your mouth more and moving it in strange shapes, right? So let's say I was gonna do the word wow. I could just say it properly, but with distortion. So like, wow, wow, wow. And that's not terrible. But what if I said it more like, row, 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 row. That sounds a little bit more interesting, right? So things you can think about. One thing, and that's something that Dave is very, very good about. Anyways, that's about all I have for you. This is a very long video, but thanks for hanging out. I haven't done one in so long. It was a lot more fun to get back to it than I thought it would be. So if you enjoy the content, like, share, and subscribe. If you want to learn how to do some metal vocals, there are many people out there who can help you do it. I'd be honored if you gave Cardivox Academy a shot. And actually, my last student of the day just canceled. And very polite, sent me a message ahead of time. We got him rescheduled, no issues. And I'm all caught up on work. So you know what that means? I'm gonna play me some Star Ocean. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here. Many thanks, much love, I'm out.